it's now official. And here's how I believe it went down. Because there's a lot of people out there who are finding fault with Deshaun Watson for raining on the David Culley parade. David Culley goes to bed knowing he'll be the next head coach of the Houston Texans, and he wakes up to Deshaun Watson wants out. We already knew he kind of wanted out. He hadn't officially asked for the trade. Here's what I believe happened. On Saturday, 12 days ago, Deshaun Watson had not yet uttered the magic words, "Please trade me." At some point after that, Monday or Tuesday, he did. Nobody asked anyone with the Texans or Deshaun Watson's camp. Nobody leaked anything. Nobody said anything. So once David Culley gets the job, or at least he's working on a deal, you had the first report last night, Charean, that Culley is going to be the next coach of the Texans. And the question is put on the tee, and I think we put it on the tee early this morning, is this going to turn around Deshaun Watson's thinking? That's when reporters, following our lead as they've done for 20 years, and that's not bragging, I'm not mad, that's how it works. That's how it works. They all follow what we write. We push the envelope, and they follow by trying to add meat to the bone. They start chasing this question of, is this good enough for Deshaun Watson? And that's when they find out, oh, hell, he asked for a trade last week. So this wasn't some effort by Watson to make things worse for David Culley. This is reporters finally asking, hey, what are you going to do? And Watson's camp saying, he's already asked for a trade. It doesn't matter.
Yeah, I think David Culley accepted the job knowing full well that Deshaun Watson still wanted out. Now, the Texans are still going to refuse to trade him. I briefly talked to David Culley last night, and it was just to congratulate him. That's basically the tone of our conversation. It was not a long conversation, and we didn't get deep into all these details of what's going to be next for him. He was busy hiring his staff, but it was just, hey, congratulations. I've known David Culley for 30 years now, almost 30 years, and I'm happy for him, but he's going into a situation, Mike, that is not a good one, and it's not of his making, but he accepted the job knowing full well what he was getting into.
Well, and let's be realistic about it. We're blending our top two topics together into one. I apologize to the control room in advance. When you're 65 and you've been a coach for decades and you've never been mentioned as a head coaching candidate for any NFL team, and the opportunity comes along, you don't say no simply because it's the most dysfunctional franchise currently in the National Football League. Because even the coach of the most dysfunctional franchise in the NFL is still a coach of a team in the NFL. So, it's all relative. It's the old George Carlin line. There is somewhere in America the worst doctor in the country, and he's still a doctor, and he's seeing patients tomorrow. So, and I'm not saying David Culley's a bad coach. I'm just saying it's a bad situation, but he's not going to say no to it because it's not like there's an alternative where there's a team saying, come coach us. Now, as relates to Watson, look, there are three possibilities, three different doors through which the Texans can go as they implement their plan. And surely they have a plan, and surely they're already implementing it, although with the Texans at this point, you never know. One is say, no, we're not trading you, and mean it. Two is say, yes, we'll trade you. Three is to say no, but not really mean it, but you say no to enhance your leverage and also to preserve the ability to mean it at some point down the line. And I think that's the smartest play here, because if he is serious about sitting out, if he is serious about paying back signing bonus money, and it would be $5.4 million a year over the next 4 years he would owe the Texans if he does sit out, and he would be giving up significant salary if he does sit out. I mean, yes, it hurts him, but it also hurts you because you don't have the player and you don't have anything you can get for the player. Now, sometimes teams are just stubborn for the sake of being stubborn. They'll cut off their nose to spite their face, and that's what the Texans may do. See, we don't know how far the Texans are going to push this because they have to send a message. They don't want to set a bad precedent. But once teams start calling and offering significant compensation packages for Deshaun Watson, and the price keeps going up and up and up, at some point they make you an offer that you can't refuse. In in a good frame of mind, you can't refuse. Maybe they just will refuse it because they want to refuse it, but at some point you're getting offered so much that the only reasonable alternative, Charean, is to take it.
And Mike, I know for a fact they want to keep Deshaun Watson. There's no question about that. They want to keep him. But it sounds like, and once you ask for a trade, I think it indicates that the bridge has been burned down, that you definitely want to go elsewhere. And if that's the case, like you said, then Deshaun Watson wants to go elsewhere. But let's look at it from the Texans' perspective. I think they're a long way from contending, even if they have Deshaun Watson on their roster. And why he signed that extension in September is a whole different issue. We could get into that because I think it was a bad move to do on his part because he knew they had already traded DeAndre Hopkins and things were not good in Houston. It was not a good roster, and yet he signed it anyway. But separate story. But even if they keep Deshaun Watson, Mike, they have no money. They have no draft picks. How is this team going to be any better next season? He led the league in passing yards this season, and they still won 4 games. This is not a team that's going to be good at any point in the near future with Deshaun Watson. So if you're looking at the Texans, to me, their best play is to get everything they can possibly get for Deshaun Watson, which means a ton of draft picks, maybe some players thrown in, maybe a quarterback thrown in who can be a bridge quarterback, if not their quarterback of the future, or get 2 or 3, a top pick, the 2 pick or the 3 pick somewhere in there and draft your quarterback of the future if you like one of those guys. You know, they've been working on the draft, frankly, their scouting department for more than a year. So they know what they think of these quarterbacks already who are coming out in the draft. But this is a team that's got to rebuild. So why not take every possible thing you can get for Deshaun Watson and start over? And I think that might be their best move long-term, Mike, or frankly, short-term to turn this thing around, assuming they can get a quarterback who is as good or close to as good as Deshaun Watson, which is hard to do.
Yeah, the hard reset button option is there, and it's more than just Deshaun Watson. It's trading J.J. Watt. It's trading maybe even a Laramie Tunsil and getting all the draft pick compensation you can. Almost do what the Browns did a few years ago when you deliberately take a huge step back, although for the Browns it wasn't that big of a step. And for the Texans at this point, it won't be that big of a step from a wins and losses standpoint. You take the big step back. You get as many picks as you can, and every one of those picks is a lottery ticket. And then you start scratching off the lottery tickets, and you build a team with Nick Caserio, the new GM, responsible for building the kind of team that he would want to have on the field in Houston. But when you have a franchise quarterback, a guy who had a tremendous season, when you look at his stats for 2020, it's MVP stuff. The only reason he's not in the conversation is because the team only won 4 games. So that's where it becomes very difficult. And here's why it's a bad idea for them to take a hard line. Because if you do take a hard line, your best case scenario is he just doesn't show up. Well, your best case scenario is if it goes sideways, he doesn't show up. Obviously, your best case scenario is he wakes up one day and says, I'll just stay and I'm happy and I had some sort of a moment and an epiphany and I'm just going to make the most of this. That's your best case scenario. If he still doesn't want to be there, your best case scenario is he doesn't show up. Your worst case scenario is he shows up and decides, I'm doing the bare minimum. I'm not going to go above and beyond the call of duty. I just work here, right? Or, you know, to take it a step farther, and there have been players who have done this, where you don't hold out, you hold in. I've got a hamstring problem. I've got a concussion. I've got this. I've got that. And I'm not saying he would do that, but you have to worry about that as the Texans. You have to look at all the things that could happen. And one thing that could happen is you get a disgruntled franchise quarterback who doesn't want to be there and starts acting out the way that Jalen Ramsey did in Jacksonville in 2019. Jalen Ramsey, represented by the same agent that represents Deshaun Watson. The difference, Ramsey decided he wanted out after it was too late for him to say, I'm just not showing up. It was during the season. It's so much harder to initiate a holdout once you're already there, and I don't want to get into the details. Trust me, it's a lot harder for the player to hold out once he's already there. It's easier if you never show up. So Watson could say, fine, I'm not giving up my money, but I'm going to be Jalen Ramsey. and I'm going to constantly say, trade me, and I'm going to constantly be a pain in your butt until you finally trade me. That's the one thing they need to worry about. And I don't know that Deshaun would do it. But in many ways, it's harder than just writing a check for, money back to the Texans because you don't have to deal with that stress every day. But that's something they should worry about because Ramsey did it in Jacksonville until they finally traded him. Watson could do it to the Texans if he wanted to, Charean.
Yeah, and Mike, they've seen this scenario play out in Houston recently with James Harden. Same exact scenario, and probably didn't get as much for James Harden as they should have, frankly. And so if they're going to trade him, they've got to decide relatively soon, at least before the draft, that they're going to pull the trigger on this and get as much as they can because they can get a ton for him. We've never seen this happen at a guy his age who's accomplished what he's accomplished so far in his young career with his entire career basically ahead of him. They could get a ton for this guy, but they can't wait and hold on to the thought of, he's going to come back to us no matter what. I mean, they've got to be open now to at least hearing out what teams will give them for Deshaun Watson because I think it'll be a ton. And, the problem from an ownership standpoint, Mike, and I grew up in the Houston area. I grew up a Cowboys fan back in the Oilers days, and I hated the Oilers, but still have a lot of friends there who are season ticket holders, family who's season ticket holders to Texans games. And the problem that I see ownership facing, Mike, if they hit that hard reset button, is we just went through COVID where we didn't have fans in the stands. They need to make up some losses. They want to have full stadiums, which is why you see what they did in Jacksonville. If you're Houston and you trade Deshaun Watson, why are you buying season tickets this year? Why are you going to a game this year? And they're going to have an empty stadium without Deshaun Watson in it. They need Deshaun Watson from a ticket selling standpoint, Mike, or something to sell tickets in Houston.
And that's a great point, and that's why whatever they do at the quarterback position needs to be someone who can help soften the blow of losing Deshaun Watson, whether that's trade for the number 2 overall pick with the Jets as part of a broader package and take Justin Fields. Would that create excitement in Houston to match Deshaun Watson? It would be 2017 all over again where you kind of watch and wait and see whether or not Fields is the real deal. The problem is you're giving up a guy who is the real deal. The other thing they could do, and I've suggested this in the past, a 3-team type of a trade where Deshaun Watson, let's assume he has no interest in biting off kneecaps and going to the Detroit Lions, although he did think he got his eye kicked out during a game in 2019 in London. This is far different from affirmatively biting off someone's kneecaps, which Dan Campbell wants his players to do. And I know it's an exaggeration, but still he said it and we have fun with it. If Watson doesn't want to play for the Lions, but the Texans are interested in Matthew Stafford, you find a third team that takes Watson, right? And you find a team that funnels Stafford through as part of the trade, and the Lions get, whatever the Lions get for Stafford. It gets complicated quickly, but the bottom line is you try to arrange it so at the end of the day the Texans have Matthew Stafford and Deshaun Watson goes somewhere other than Detroit. And you could just do two separate trades, or it could be a 3-team thing done all at once. And if I'm the Texans, I want to know. I'm trading Watson. I want Stafford. I'm only getting rid of one guy if I have someone else who's going to sell the tickets, move the needle, and fill the stadium.
Mike, what do you see as the deadline on this thing when you look at it? Is it the draft in April, or do you think it's before that they have to make a decision to get the best deal for Deshaun Watson? Is it before free agency starts?
I think ideally you do it before free agency starts because if you have multiple teams that are at the table, these are teams that need quarterbacks. And once the carousel starts to spin March 17 at 4 p.m. Eastern, other quarterbacks that you may be interested in are going to agree to terms elsewhere. Other trades that you may do are going to happen elsewhere. If, for example, the Texans would like to bring Matthew Stafford back home to Texas where he went to high school, you don't want him to get traded to the Colts before you have a chance to get him. Then it all falls apart. So I think that this new habit we've seen of teams reaching deals well before March 17, and Sims and I were talking about this earlier today. We did a long interview with Alex Smith at the Super Bowl 3 years ago on a Tuesday. It came out that night. He was going to be traded to Washington. It's like, gee, thanks a lot. Now we can't use the damn interview, of course, because it's all about us. But that's when the deal came out, the Tuesday of Super Bowl week. And then it's just pending until March 17. So I would want to do it now. I would want to get people to the table now. And we saw how quickly a contract, well, not a contract, but a trade can fall together last year when Stephon Diggs. I mean, think about the progression. Kirk Cousins gets an extension in Minnesota. That same day, Diggs starts tweeting, I'm out. And by that evening, there was a deal with the Buffalo Bills to trade Stephon Diggs. So you have to get the Texans to be serious about it. And it may take them a brief period of anger, denial, bargaining, depression, and acceptance to work their way through it. They've had some time, though, to work through it, because even though it's been a little more than a week since Deshaun Watson has requested a trade, they knew before that this was coming. They can either be stubborn and have Watson either not show up or show up with an attitude, although I still don't think he'll do it. I don't think he's wired that way, and I'm not saying it's bad to be that way. I just don't think he could pull it off. I think he's all in if he's there, or they can maximize what they get for him and move on. I guess he also could show up in the James Harden fat suit. That could expedite things.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah, absolutely it could, right?
I still don't know. What did he do? But how did he go? Either he's wearing a fat suit in the before picture or a girdle in the after. You can't transform your body that quickly.
Exactly. Yeah, it's amazing, isn't it? The before and after pictures, whatever he did, he needs to sell that, a weight loss program. I'd sign up for it.
Hi, I'm Mike Tirico, and thanks for watching. Make sure to hit subscribe for the latest news and highlights from NBC Sports.